If you can't even pay a $500 debt, maybe it's time to stop pretending this is your home, my daughter-in-law said as she set down her wine glass. My son sat beside her and said nothing. That was the moment I realized I had already lost my family long before they asked me to leave. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I was 72 years old when a $500 medical bill became the excuse my family used to push me out of their lives. Looking back now, I understand that the debt was never the real issue. It was simply the final thread holding together a relationship that had been unraveling for years. The dining room felt unusually quiet that evening. The chandelier above us cast a warm golden light across the polished oak table, but nothing about the room felt warm anymore. My late husband, Richard, had built that table with his own hands nearly 30 years earlier. Every scratch in the wood carried a memory. Birthday dinners, Thanksgiving meals, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper scattered across the floor. Yet as I sat there staring at my plate, it felt as though I were visiting a stranger's house. Lauren had prepared grilled chicken and vegetables. She always made healthy meals, though she never seemed to enjoy cooking for anyone but herself and Michael. I picked at my food quietly while they discussed home renovations. A new kitchen island, updated flooring, a backyard patio. They spoke about the future as though I wasn't sitting right there listening. Then Lauren suddenly turned toward me. "Did you ever pay that bill?" she asked. I looked up. "Which bill?" "The hospital bill. The one that's been sitting on the counter for weeks." I felt my face grow warm. "Not yet. My Social Security check comes next Friday." Lauren exchanged a glance with Michael. A look that lasted only a second, but somehow said everything. $500 isn't exactly a small oversight, she replied. You can't just ignore responsibilities forever. I swallowed carefully. I'm not ignoring it. I just needed a little time. Michael shifted in his seat, but still didn't look at me. Lauren's right, Mom. Things are getting harder. Maybe it's time to be realistic. Realistic. Funny how people use that word when they're preparing to hurt someone. I stared at my son. The same boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard because he thought they were beautiful flowers. The same boy who cried when he left for college because he didn't want me to feel lonely. Somewhere along the way, that boy had disappeared. Lauren leaned back in her chair. If you can't manage $500, how are you supposed to manage everything else? Everything else? I asked quietly. Utilities, insurance, property taxes, life. Her voice remained calm, almost cheerful. Maybe it's time to accept that you need help. I looked around the room, at the framed family photos on the wall, at the curtains I had sewn myself years ago, at the kitchen doorway where Richard used to stand every morning holding a cup of coffee. Then Lauren delivered the sentence that changed everything. Honestly, Eleanor, maybe it's time to leave. The words landed softly, almost politely. Somehow that made them hurt even more. I waited for Michael to say something. Anything. A protest. A defense. A reminder that I was his mother. Instead, he lowered his eyes. Maybe that would be best, he said quietly. The silence that followed felt endless. I nodded once, slowly. Then I stood up and carried my plate to the sink. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. I understand, I said. Neither of them stopped me. Neither of them apologized. I walked upstairs to my bedroom and closed the door. The room was dark except for the small lamp beside my bed. Richard's photograph sat on the nightstand exactly where it had been since the day he passed away. I sat down and looked at his smiling face. For a long time, I simply sat there. Not crying, not angry, just tired. The next morning, while I was folding clothes into a suitcase, my phone rang. I almost ignored it. The number wasn't familiar, but something told me to answer. Mrs. Hayes, a man's voice asked. This is Robert Collins. I was your husband's attorney. There are some matters regarding Richard's estate that require your attention. I believe you should come to my office as soon as possible. I glanced around the room one last time. At the packed suitcase. At the family photographs. At the life I thought I was losing. Then I heard the next sentence. There's something in your husband's final instructions that nobody in the family knows about. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt something change. I ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed for several minutes, holding the phone in both hands. Outside the window, the morning sun spread across the backyard that Richard had loved so much. The maple tree he planted 20 years earlier swayed gently in the breeze. For a moment, everything looked exactly the same. Yet nothing felt the same anymore. I finished packing my suitcase and zipped it closed. There was less to take than I expected. A few changes of clothes, family photographs, Richard's old watch. The rest suddenly seemed unimportant. As I carried the suitcase downstairs, I noticed that Michael's truck was gone. He had already left for work. Lauren was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone while drinking coffee from a white ceramic mug. She glanced up when she heard my footsteps. Her eyes moved briefly to the suitcase. Then she looked back at her screen. "Leaving already?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "I think that is best." She nodded as though we were discussing the weather. "Probably for everyone." I waited for some sign of discomfort, some trace of guilt. There was none. I picked up my purse from the entry table, the same table where Richard used to leave handwritten notes for me every morning. Sometimes they were reminders. Sometimes they were simple messages wishing me a good day. I could still picture his handwriting. Neat, careful, thoughtful. Lauren's voice interrupted my thoughts. "I hope everything works out for you." The words sounded polite, but they felt empty. I simply nodded and walked out the front door. The cool morning air hit my face. I stood on the porch for a moment and looked back at the house. Richard and I had spent 43 years building a life together. We painted those walls ourselves. We planted the flower beds together. We sat on that porch every summer evening watching the sunset. Now I was leaving, with one suitcase while someone else decided whether I still belonged there. The drive to my sister's house took nearly 40 minutes. During the trip, memories kept surfacing. Richard laughing while teaching our grandson to fish. Christmas mornings crowded with family. Birthday cakes. Graduation ceremonies. At the time, I believed those memories represented something permanent. Now they felt like photographs from another lifetime. My sister, Carol, greeted me warmly when I arrived. She hugged me tightly without asking questions. Somehow she already knew enough from the sound of my voice during our phone call. "Stay as long as you need," she said. Her guest room was small but comfortable. A quilt covered the bed. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of peace. That afternoon, while Carol prepared lunch, I found myself staring at Richard's watch again. I remembered the final weeks before he passed away. Even during his illness, he worried more about everyone else than himself. He often spoke about family, about responsibility, about protecting the people he loved. At the time, I assumed those conversations came from a husband preparing for the inevitable. Now I wondered if there had been something more behind them. The next morning, I drove downtown to meet Robert Collins. His office occupied the third floor of an old brick building near the courthouse. When I stepped into the reception area, a young assistant greeted me and asked me to wait. A few minutes later, Robert appeared. He looked older than I remembered, with silver hair and tired eyes. Yet his expression changed when he saw me. It was not sympathy. It was concern. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, "thank you for coming. There are several things your husband instructed me to discuss with you, and I believe what you are about to learn will explain far more than you realize." Robert led me into his office and closed the door behind us. The room smelled faintly of old books and coffee. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with legal volumes and framed photographs. I sat across from his desk while he opened a thick folder and carefully removed several documents. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence felt deliberate. Finally, he folded his hands together and looked directly at me. "Before Richard passed away, he came to see me several times," he said. "Much more often than most people realize." I frowned. Richard had always handled legal matters himself. He rarely discussed them at home. "Why?" I asked. Robert leaned back slightly. "Because he was worried." That answer surprised me. Richard was many things, but worried was not a word people usually use to describe him. He had always been calm, practical, steady. Even during difficult times, he seemed to carry a quiet confidence that reassured everyone around him. "Worried about what?" I asked. Robert glanced down at the documents. "About what might happen after he was gone." The room suddenly felt smaller. I looked at the folder on his desk. Did he know something I did not? Robert nodded slowly. "Not exactly, but he noticed things." My stomach tightened. "What things?" He opened one of the documents and adjusted his glasses. Changes in family dynamics, financial conversations, certain behaviors that concerned him. I immediately thought of Lauren. Over the years, she had developed a habit of treating every family gathering like a business meeting. Conversations often drifted toward property values, retirement accounts, investments, and inheritances. At the time, I dismissed it as ambition. Richard apparently had not. Robert continued. Richard never accused anyone of wrongdoing. However, he believed there was a possibility that family relationships could change after his death. I lowered my eyes. They already had, far more quickly than I could have imagined. He specifically instructed me to monitor certain circumstances, Robert said. And if those circumstances occurred, I was to contact you immediately. My heart began beating faster. What circumstances? Robert paused before answering. If you were ever pressured financially, if you were denied access to assets that belonged to you, or if you were forced from your primary residence. I stared at him. For several seconds, I could not speak. The events of the past week echoed through my mind. The medical bill, the dinner conversation, the suitcase, the front door closing behind me. Richard had anticipated something like this years ago. How could he possibly know? I whispered. Robert gave a sad smile. He did not know. He prepared. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name appeared on the front in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. The sight of it nearly took my breath away. I had not seen his handwriting since before the funeral. Carefully, I picked up the envelope. My fingers trembled slightly. Richard left this with me almost 3 years ago, Robert explained. His instructions were very clear. This envelope could only be delivered if specific conditions were met. I looked up at him. And those conditions have been met? Robert nodded. Yes, Eleanor. They have. The room fell silent again. Outside the office window, traffic moved through downtown streets. People walked along the sidewalks carrying coffee cups and briefcases. Ordinary lives continued as though nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. I turned the envelope over in my hands and studied the familiar handwriting one more time. For the first time since leaving the house, I felt something stronger than sadness. Richard had seen farther ahead than any of us. And whatever waited inside that envelope was about to reveal why. I looked at Robert for a long moment before carefully opening the envelope. The paper inside had been folded neatly. Even before I unfolded it, I recognized Richard's habit of precision. He treated important things with care. Letters, promises, people. My eyes moved slowly across the page. My dearest Eleanor, it began. Instantly, I heard his voice in my mind. Calm, steady, familiar. The kind of voice that had carried me through 43 years of marriage. I swallowed hard and continued reading. Richard explained that he hoped the letter would never need to be delivered. He wrote that families sometimes changed after loss. Grief revealed character. Money revealed priorities. Time revealed intentions. If I was reading those words, it meant certain fears of his had become reality. I lowered the page for a moment. Robert remained silent. He understood this was not a legal document anymore. It was a conversation between a husband and wife separated by time. I continued. Richard described several incidents I had nearly forgotten. Small moments that seemed insignificant when they happened. A holiday dinner where Lauren complained about the cost of hosting family. A birthday gathering where discussions somehow turned toward property values and inheritance planning. A weekend barbecue where Michael joked about what he would do with the house one day. At the time, I laughed along with everyone else. Richard had not. He wrote that he noticed how often financial topics appeared whenever family was together. He noticed who listened carefully when investments were mentioned. He noticed who seemed disappointed when expenses reduced available savings. Most of all, he noticed how differently people behaved when they believed no one was paying attention. Each sentence felt like another piece of a puzzle sliding into place. Memories I had ignored suddenly looked different. A conversation, a glance, an awkward silence. Individually, they meant little. Together, they formed a picture I could no longer deny. Then I reached a passage that made me stop reading entirely. Richard wrote that he had arranged several protections to ensure my future security. Not because he distrusted family completely, but because he believed no one should depend entirely upon another person's goodwill, especially during vulnerable years. My hands tightened around the letter. Vulnerable years. That was exactly how I felt after losing him. The house became quieter. Decisions became harder. Every problem seemed larger without his presence beside me. Perhaps that was why Lauren's words hurt so much. Not because they were cruel, because they arrived when I was already carrying so much loss. Richard understood that. Somehow he always did. I finished reading the final paragraph. If circumstances have led you here, trust yourself. You are stronger than you realize. Do not rush. Do not react emotionally. Observe carefully. The truth has a way of revealing itself when people believe they have already won. I slowly folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. The office remained quiet. Robert finally spoke. "There is more." I looked up. He opened another folder and removed several legal documents. Richard established certain arrangements years ago. Most family members are unaware they exist. My pulse quickened. What kind of arrangements? Robert slid the documents toward me. The kind that become important when intentions are tested. For the first time since leaving my home, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. Somewhere ahead, answers were waiting. And Richard had spent years making certain I would find them. I studied the documents for nearly an hour while Robert explained each page carefully. Some contained legal language that felt complicated at first, but the overall message became clear surprisingly quickly. Richard had spent years preparing for possibilities that I never considered. He established protections designed to ensure that I would never become financially dependent on anyone else's decisions. Certain assets had been placed into carefully structured arrangements. Specific instructions governed how they could be accessed. Most importantly, several conditions would only activate if particular events occurred. Events that now seemed uncomfortably familiar. Robert pointed to one section and adjusted his glasses. "Your husband was very thorough," he said. "He believed planning was an act of love." I smiled faintly. That sounded exactly like Richard. He planned family vacations 6 months in advance. He kept maintenance records for every appliance in the house. He even created detailed instructions for winterizing the garden every fall. Preparing for the future was simply how he cared for people. As the meeting continued, another realization began to settle into my mind. Richard had never viewed wealth as a reward. He viewed it as responsibility. Throughout our marriage, he often said that money revealed character more than it created comfort. At the time, I thought it was simply one of his favorite sayings. Now I understood why he repeated it so often. Before I left the office, Robert handed me a small folder containing copies of several documents. "Take these home," he said. "Read them slowly. There is no need to make any decisions today." I thanked him and drove back to Carol's house. The afternoon sky had turned gray, and a light rain tapped against the windshield. Somehow the weather matched my mood. Not sad, reflective. Everything felt different now. Not because I suddenly possessed answers, but because I finally understood there were answers to find. When I arrived, Carol was sitting at the kitchen table working on a crossword puzzle. She looked up immediately. "How did it go?" she asked. I placed the folder on the table and sat across from her. Richard knew more than I realized. She studied my face. "Are you all right?" I nodded. "I think so." That evening, after dinner, I sat alone in the guest room reading through the documents again. Outside, rain continued falling softly against the windows. The steady sound reminded me of evenings long ago when Richard and I would sit together on the porch watching storms roll across the horizon. Those memories no longer felt painful. Instead, they felt grounding, like anchors holding me steady while everything else shifted around me. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for several seconds before answering. "Hello," I said. There was a brief pause. "Mom." His voice sounded uncertain. "I just wanted to check on you." I looked down at the documents spread across the bed. "That is kind of you." Another silence followed. "Lauren feels bad about how things happened," he said. The statement felt rehearsed. Careful. Incomplete. "I see," I replied. "Maybe we should talk soon," he continued. "There are some things we need to discuss." I thought about Richard's letter. Observe carefully. Do not react emotionally. The truth reveals itself when people believe they have already won. "Perhaps," I said calmly. After we ended the call, I placed the phone beside me and looked out the window. Something had changed in Michael's voice. Not guilt, not regret, concern. And for the first time, I found myself wondering whether news had already begun reaching people who never expected me to walk into Robert Collins's office. The next morning I woke before sunrise. For a few minutes, I lay still and listened to the quiet house. Carol was still asleep. Rain clouds had moved on during the night, leaving behind a cool breeze that drifted through the partially open window. I sat up slowly and looked at the folder resting on the bedside table. The documents seemed almost ordinary now, yet I knew they contained information capable of changing everything. Richard had spent years preparing for a future that was finally arriving. After breakfast, I decided to take a walk through a nearby park. I needed time to think. The paved path wound around a small lake where ducks glided across the water. Families pushed strollers. Retirees walked their dogs. Life moved forward with its usual rhythm. Watching them, I realized how much of my energy during the past few years had been spent trying to keep peace within the family. I overlooked comments that should have concerned me. I excused behavior that would have troubled Richard. I convinced myself that patience could solve problems that were actually growing worse. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time it was Lauren. Seeing her name surprised me. She had rarely called me directly during the past several years. Most communication went through Michael. I answered after a moment. "Hello, Lauren." Her voice sounded unusually warm. "Eleanor, I wanted to check on you." The sudden kindness felt strange. "That is thoughtful of you," I replied. "We have all been under stress lately," she continued. "Perhaps things were said that should not have been said." I stopped walking and looked across the lake. A week earlier, those words might have meant everything to me. Now they felt carefully chosen. "Perhaps," I said calmly. "Michael is worried about you," she added. "We both are." Another silence followed. Then she casually asked, "Have you spoken with anyone about Richard's estate recently?" There it was, the real reason for the call. I almost smiled. Richard's words echoed in my mind once again. "Observe carefully. The truth reveals itself." "Why do you ask?" I said. "Oh, no reason," Lauren answered quickly. "I was just curious." Curious. That single word told me more than the entire conversation. We exchanged a few more polite sentences before ending the call. As soon as I lowered the phone, I understood something important. News had definitely begun to spread. Somehow Michael and Lauren knew that I had met with Robert. They did not know what I had learned, but they were worried enough to start asking questions. That afternoon, I returned to Robert's office for a scheduled follow-up meeting. He greeted me with the same calm professionalism. Once we were seated, he opened another folder. "There is something else you should know," he said. "Over the past few days, I have received several inquiries." My pulse quickened. "From whom?" "Family members." I stared at him. Robert nodded. "Questions about estate timelines, asset distributions, property ownership." None of those conversations had involved me. No one had called to ask how I was doing. No one had asked whether I needed help. Instead, they were asking about money. Robert folded his hands. "Eleanor, your husband anticipated many possibilities. What he could not predict was how quickly certain people would reveal their priorities." I looked down at the folder and felt an unexpected sense of calm. For years I had doubted my instincts. Now the evidence was appearing one piece at a time. And somewhere ahead, a final truth was waiting for everyone to see. Over the next several days, I said very little. That turned out to be the easiest part. People reveal more when they believe you have nothing to say. I spent my mornings helping Carol in the garden and my afternoons reviewing documents with Robert. Meanwhile, Michael and Lauren became increasingly interested in reconnecting. The change was impossible to miss. Michael called almost every day, sometimes twice. He asked how I was sleeping, whether I needed anything, whether Carol's guest room was comfortable. On the surface, his concerns sounded genuine. Yet every conversation eventually drifted toward the same subject: Richard's estate, the timing of legal meetings, the status of paperwork, questions disguised as casual curiosity. One afternoon, Michael invited me to lunch. We met at a small restaurant downtown that Richard and I used to enjoy. Michael arrived early and greeted me with a warm smile. For a brief moment, I saw the boy he once was. Then the conversation began. "Mom, I have been thinking," he said while stirring his iced tea. "Maybe we should discuss the future." I nodded politely. "What part of the future?" He leaned forward slightly. "The house, the property, everything Dad worked for." There it was again. Not family, not healing, assets. I listened quietly as he explained ideas for renovations, investment opportunities, long-term plans. He spoke as though ownership questions had already been settled. I simply smiled and changed the subject. The disappointment on his face lasted only a second, but I noticed it. Later that evening, Robert called. "I thought you should know something," he said. "Several additional inquiries came in today, from family." I asked. "Yes." His voice remained professional. Some questions were surprisingly specific. I sat down slowly. Specific how? Property valuations, distribution procedures, access timelines. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat alone for a long time. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Richard had been right. Once people believed an inheritance might be involved, Priorities became visible very quickly. 2 days later, Carol and I stopped by a local grocery store. As we walked through the parking lot, I noticed Lauren standing near her SUV speaking with a friend. She did not see me at first. Their conversation drifted across the rows of parked cars. "Once everything settles, we can finally renovate the kitchen," Lauren said. "The old layout drives me crazy." Her friend laughed. "That will not be cheap." Lauren shrugged confidently. "It will not matter." The words hung in the air. My feet stopped moving. Carol glanced at me, but remained silent. A moment later, Lauren turned and saw us. The smile vanished from her face. "Eleanor," she said quickly, "I did not know you were here." "Clearly," I replied. Her expression tightened for a second before returning to its usual friendliness. We exchanged polite conversation and then went our separate ways. But the damage had already been done. I now understood something important. They were no longer wondering whether money existed. They were already spending it in their minds. That evening, Robert called again. This time his tone sounded different, more serious. "The formal reading has been scheduled," he said. My pulse quickened immediately. "When?" "Next Friday." I looked out the window as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Nearly everyone expected that meeting to confirm their assumptions. They believed they understood Richard's plans. They believed the outcome was already decided. And for the first time, I realized how shocked they were about to be. Friday arrived with clear skies and unusually warm weather. I remember noticing that as I stepped out of Carol's house that morning. The sunlight felt almost symbolic, as though the world had decided it was finally time for certain truths to come into view. Robert's office conference room was already filling when I arrived. Several family members sat around the large table. Some I had not seen in months. Others had barely spoken to me since Richard's funeral. Yet today they were all present. Their interest in family gatherings seemed to have returned quite suddenly. Michael stood when he saw me enter. "Mom," he said with an uneasy smile. "You made it." "Of course," I replied. Lauren sat beside him. She offered a polite greeting before quickly looking away. I took my seat near the end of the table and quietly observed the room. The atmosphere felt strangely optimistic. Conversations drifted toward future plans, home improvements, travel ideas, investment opportunities. No one openly discussed inheritance, but the assumption hung in the air. They believed they already knew how the story would end. A few minutes later, Robert entered carrying several folders. The room immediately became silent. He thanked everyone for attending and began reviewing legal procedures. Then he opened the primary estate file. "Before we discuss distributions," he said, "it is important to review the complete structure of Richard Hayes's estate plan." Several people exchanged curious looks. This was clearly not what they expected. Robert continued reading. Property holdings, investment accounts, business interests that Richard had accumulated over decades. With each page, the estimated value grew larger. I noticed Lauren straighten in her chair. Michael's attention became absolute. The room remained perfectly still. Finally, Robert reached the summary page. "The total estate value currently exceeds $4 million. A sharp silence followed. No one spoke. For several seconds, nobody even moved. Then I saw the reaction spread across the room. Surprise, excitement, relief, calculation. Every emotion Richard predicted seemed to appear at once. Robert waited patiently before continuing. "However," he said, "the estate includes several conditional provisions established by Richard Hayes personally." The atmosphere shifted immediately. Lauren's smile faded. Michael frowned slightly. Robert opened another folder. These provisions were created to ensure the protection, dignity, and long-term security of Eleanor Hayes. My heart remained calm. I already knew what was coming. Everyone else did not. Robert began reading Richard's words aloud. The instructions were precise. Any beneficiary who attempted to pressure Eleanor financially, interfere with her housing security, or remove her from her primary residence would immediately forfeit their inheritance rights under the estate plan. The room became completely silent. I heard someone draw a sharp breath. Michael's face lost all color. Lauren stared at Robert as though she had misunderstood him. Robert continued. Documented evidence, witness testimony, and recent events had triggered those provisions. Therefore, certain beneficiaries were no longer eligible to receive distributions. The silence somehow became even heavier. Lauren finally spoke. "There must be some mistake." Robert calmly shook his head. "There is no mistake." Michael looked toward me. His expression carried disbelief more than anger. For the first time, he seemed to understand what had actually happened. Years earlier, Richard had anticipated this exact possibility. He had not acted out of suspicion. He had acted out of love. Robert turned the final page. Under these provisions, the protected estate. Assets remain under Eleanor Hayes's control and supervision. Nobody spoke. Nobody argued. They simply sat there facing the consequences of choices they never expected to matter. And in that moment, I realized the inheritance itself was not the real revelation. The real revelation was discovering exactly what people were willing to sacrifice for it. The meeting ended quietly. No dramatic arguments. No raised voices. Just silence. The kind of silence that settles over a room when reality arrives without warning. One by one, family members gathered their belongings and left the conference room. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked at me with expressions I could not fully read. Shock, regret, embarrassment, perhaps all three. Michael remained seated long after everyone else stood up. Lauren stared at the table in front of her. Neither seemed to know what to say. For years they had assumed the future would unfold a certain way. Now that future had disappeared. Robert organized his files and gave me a small nod before leaving us alone. The door closed softly behind him. Michael finally looked up. "Mom," he said. His voice sounded older somehow. Tired. I never thought any of this would happen. I studied him for a moment. The sadness on his face was real. But sadness and accountability are not the same thing. "Neither did I replied. Lauren swallowed hard. "We made mistakes." The words hung in the air. I had imagined hearing them many times over the past few weeks. Yet now that they had finally arrived, they felt surprisingly small. Some mistakes happen in a moment. Others happen through 100 choices made over many years. What happened between us belonged to the second category. Richard understood people better than any of us, I said quietly. That is why he prepared. Neither of them argued, because there was nothing left to argue about. The documents had spoken clearly. Facts rarely leave room for debate. A few minutes later, I walked out of the building and into the afternoon sunshine. The air felt lighter than it had in months. Not because I had won something, because I no longer needed to wonder where I stood. Uncertainty had been replaced by truth. During the following weeks, several things changed. I moved into a comfortable townhouse near Carol's neighborhood. It was not extravagant. It was peaceful. Large windows overlooked a small park. Children played there in the evenings. Birds gathered near a fountain each morning. For the first time since Richard passed away, I began building a life that belonged entirely to me. Michael called occasionally. Our conversations remained polite, careful. Healing takes time, especially when trust has been damaged. I did not shut him out, but I no longer ignored reality in order to preserve comfort. Lauren called once. She apologized again. This time her words sounded more sincere. I thanked her. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not always the same thing. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go of bitterness while still remembering what happened. Richard understood that too. Months later, I returned to the old neighborhood for the first time. I parked across the street and looked at the house where so much of my life had unfolded. Memories filled every corner of that place. Some joyful, some painful, yet none of them owned me anymore. As I sat there, I thought about the $500 that started everything. Such a small number. Less than the cost of a household appliance. Less than a family vacation. Yet it revealed more about people than $4 million ever could. Money did not destroy our family. Choices did. Assumptions did. Entitlement did. Richard's greatest gift was never the estate he built. It was the wisdom he left behind. He understood that character is revealed when nobody thinks they are being tested. As I drove away, I felt no desire for revenge. No need to prove anything. Peace had replaced those feelings. The future stretched ahead, bright and open. And somewhere, I like to believe Richard was smiling. Because the woman he spent 43 years loving had finally remembered something important. My worth was never determined by a debt, an inheritance, or anyone else's approval. It was always mine to keep.